Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to a rather special Gomo weekly webinar, where today we're joined by Chris Appleton, who's the Digital Content Manager at Flutter and a long-time Gomo user. We'll be getting going in just a few moments. We can see that got lots of people tuning in. We've had a huge amount of interest in this particular webinar, so thank you all very much for taking the time to join us today. So just while we do that, that we're going to be taking questions using the question panel in GoToWebinar. So as those who have joined us for these webinars before, so what we sometimes do is do a bit of a global weather report, where if you could just find the question panel in GoToWebinar and let us know just where you're from and what the weather is like where you are. Just to get it started, so I'm in Brighton on England's south coast, and it's a rather damp and gloomy day here today. All our British summer weather, as usual, seems to have disappeared. And I can see Nicola is saying in Surrey, UK, cloudy with occasional rain. You're just up the road from us, so I think we're getting the same one. And Richard, you're saying that you're in Warrington, a bit further north from here, and it's grey and dull. So it looks as if the UK isn't doing too well today. But however, Colette is in Pennsylvania in the US and saying it's beautiful. Well, we're very envious of that. And also, Ashley, you're in Wisconsin, even in the USA, sunny and humid. Well, certainly that you've been having a very hot summer here, that I hear. We only had a few days where it only got up to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, Maria, you're saying that that you can't hear us. Um, you should. It looks as if everybody else is hearing us. Maria, if you can hear us, if you can check your settings, you should see a settings button in GoToWebinar where you'll be able to select the right headphones. By the way, we will be recording this for any of you who either have to drop out or we have colleagues who couldn't join us today. Susan, you're in Johannesburg, freezing by our standards, 18 degrees. We would long to have 18 degrees right now. And Mark, you're in Birmingham, Alabama, that is, high of 95 degrees Fahrenheit today and sunny. Wow, that is hot. Yeah, we don't think we ever get that temperature here in England. So, well, thank you very much, everyone, and do feel free to use the question panel as we go through today. And oh, Christina's also saying in Munich, in Germany, we have November today. It's only 14 degrees centigrade there. Well, we do have a range around the world here. It's always good to get this global weather report. So let's get going with today's webinar. So we are delighted today for this really special one that we're joined by Chris Appleton, who's the Digital Content Manager at Flutter. And for those of you who were at our Gomo Live event in London recently, that you'll know what great reception Chris got in showing his real life examples of how he uses Gomo's advanced features. And in fact, what he showed was all the things that we've been exploring week by week, those of you who've been joining these weekly webinars. So things like variables and display conditions. And we thought it'd be a fantastic idea if we could bring Chris to a wider audience and to show how he's bringing together all these techniques in a real life way for business purposes. But just a bit about Chris, that he's been in L&D for 12 years. He started at Dixon's Retail here in the UK, then Telefonica 02, which is where I first met him. And now he's with Flutter, where he oversees digital learning content for brands such as Petfair, Sky Betting, and Gaming. And he's got a technical engineering background, but he says that he loves pushing buttons to see what happens, working out why it happened, and thinking of ways to make it to do something different. And I can tell you that I've learned so much from Chris and how he uses Gomo, so I'm sure you will too. So I'm just going to hand over to Chris to take us into our session. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Yes, I am a button pusher. I forgot I told you all that stuff about me. I thought you were a mind reader of some kind, but no, all very accurate. For the sake of completeness, I'm in Leicestershire in the UK. It is about 14 degrees here, I think. It's grey and overcast. But that's good because the farmer has just started chainsawing something right outside my window, so I can have the windows closed. So yes, what I've done is like you said, for those that you were at the face-to-face event, I did go through some interesting little things that I have built and kind of problem solved and ways of using Gomo. I have put a little bit more in there, so if you were at that event, don't worry that it's all going to be a carbon copy of that I've been adding to the range of things I was showing off there. The way I'm going to run this is I'm going to share my screen and I've built a course which will kind of go through step by step and just show off some techniques and explain what's happening each point. I will flip between the published course and I'll be showing how that's been built in Gomo as well. So as we go through each technique and thing I've done, I'll kind of be able to explain how it's been built and give a little background of why it's useful. So some things are maybe just for show, some things are to kind of, I bet you didn't know you could do this with Gomo, but I'll try and make it relevant to a problem you may have to solve as well. I will try and remember to ask if there's any questions. I will try and remember to check the question box as well. I know Hugh is going to kind of cover off anything that he can, but when I start confusing him as well, Hugh, just feel free to interrupt and point me towards the question box, and I've got a few checkpoints where I'll just make sure you're all still with me. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and like I say, I'm going to flick between the two. So if I share my whole screen, we should be able to hopefully see that, a view that you're all hopefully familiar with. And I'm also just going to turn my camera off just because you're not here to see me, you're here to see what I've built. So, okay, so what we'll do then is we'll start by just showing off the course that's been built. So my disclaimer here is that I have not put any effort into any design work on this. This is using a standard theme with no visual tweaks or anything. I would normally do that before I launch a course, but this is all about what's happening in the background. So I've got a few sections that I'm going to run through. But yeah, it is very basic looking. So please don't be too alarmed about the visuals. There is a bit of a story to this. There is a bit of a journey through it, if you like. So I'm going to start by covering some bits which you may or may not have experienced before, that you may or may not have either been in one of Hugh's webinars where they've been explained, or even used them yourself. But it kind of all builds up towards hopefully a bit of a finale. There is a section on the screen that you'll see called "Even Hugh Hasn't Seen This," where I posed myself a problem that I wanted to solve for this webinar, and genuinely Hugh is completely in the dark about what's going to happen at that point. So I'm surrounded by wood. I'm going to touch wood and hope it works. We'll start then by just talking through display conditions, because this is one of the points that the rest of it is going to hinge on. And as a bit of a reminder, if you've used them before, or maybe you're brand new to display conditions, what display conditions enable you to do in Gomo is to control when something is visible, based on whether you have either set a variable or whether you have interacted with something. So at a very basic level, if I click button 1, I get that picture. If I click button 2, I get that picture. And I click button 3, I get that picture. And the reason that's happening is because those 3 pictures are all actually on the page, but they have a display condition set up. And if I go back to the Gomo authoring environment, what you'll see is the page has the three pictures on there, and the display condition for each down here is based on a variable called score. I've been a little bit cheeky with variables. I've reused them sometimes, so they don't always, the name of them isn't always completely decided into why they're being used. But I've got a variable score. When that equals 1, I'm going to display this top picture. The second one, when score equals 2, and the third one has a display condition of when score equals 3. So already you can imagine that you would never be able to see all 3 pictures together, because score can only be one of those three things. And to get them to change, these buttons have the opposite effect. So the action on this top button is set variable score to 1. The second button is set variable score to 2. And you're probably already ahead of me by thinking set variable score to 3 on the third button. So I've got a single variable, I've got 3 buttons, and I've got 3 pictures. And the effect of that is just being able to click whichever one I want and land on whichever picture I want. So that's a very basic use of display conditions with a variable to get a picture to display. I can, however, do it slightly differently. So this will have the same effect. However, what's happening here is it's going to add the pictures to it. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm not using variables. This is actually a slightly different way of using display conditions. And the mechanism behind this on this page is that actually these buttons have no actions. These buttons just exist as buttons that at first glance don't do anything. So none of these buttons have an action. But what I can do is set a display condition in the picture to be this asset interacted. So I set the display condition type to be asset interacted. I choose the button, and you do have to make a note of which ID it is. So this I know it's on screen 2 and it's asset 03. And the same for this picture, so that will be screen 2 asset 04, which is the second picture, second button on this page. And the same for this one, screen 02 asset 05 for this one. And it works without using variables. So the nice bit is you don't have to set variables up. You've saved yourself 10 seconds in setting your variable up. But the downside, as we saw, is that you end up with this where you can trigger something into appear, but you can't turn it off again. So this actually works quite nicely for a one shot. You know, if you want to just have something appear when you've clicked a button, then you don't need to bother setting up variables and keeping track of those variables. And you might save a little bit of time creating something. You might save a little bit of storage space in there. So the way I would normally use that, and I do tend to use this when I'm creating courses, is if I was to click one of these buttons, there will be an image appear, but the other buttons will disappear, and that stops someone trying to click more than one button. So you might be in a situation where you're asking a question and you want the learner to answer. It's not a test. It's not, you're not scoring it, but you just want them to do something. You want them to think about the question you've asked and to do something. And to do that, I'm going to click button 2. That picture that we've used to seeing appears. Button 1 and 3 have actually disappeared. Okay, so I can't click button 1, I can't click button 3. It's a correct page, if you like. I clicked button 2, I saw picture number 2, and the job there is done. Now that's a slightly different bit of code to do that. And on this screen, there are some display conditions both on the pictures. So these are the ones we're used to seeing. Picture 1 has the display condition of I clicked that button. Picture 2 has a display condition of I clicked the button 2. And picture 3 has that same display condition of I clicked the button. However, I've also put display conditions on the buttons too. So still no actions, still no actual action in there. But on button 1, if buttons 2 and 3 have been pressed, then button 1 will disappear. Same on button 2, same on button 3. So what that means, if I press button 1, buttons 2 and 3, their display condition is now no longer true, and it will disappear. So on button 2, I've actually selected there that button 1 and button 3, if all of them haven't been interacted with, so if I've not pressed button 1 and not pressed button 3, then button 2 will still be visible. And it's a little bit of a flip side round way of thinking about it, that I'm controlling whether this button is visible or not based on whether I've pressed other buttons. But that's how that's working. So for button 2, I basically want it to disappear if I hit either button 1 or button 3. And that will stop the learner from trying to select more than one thing. And it just might be that the learning journey you're taking someone just wants them to choose one, think about what they've done, and to move on. And then the last thing I just want to look at in display conditions is the fact that it's not just when something has been interacted with. So a few of the assets that are built into Gomo have both an interacted and a complete state. The buttons we've been using just the interactive because you click them once and that's their job done. But some assets like you can see there a hotspot image, you've got tabs, you've got accordions, you have things like comic strips, or any of the things where something can be in progress before it's completed. They have both an interacted and a complete state. And I've done it slightly differently in both of these. So you'll see there, this one already says not started. But for the image marker, as soon as I start clicking, it knows it's in progress. And I click the second one, and I click the third one, and then finally it tells me it's completed. Whereas for the tabs, I've done it slightly differently, which is, sorry, for the accordion, slightly differently, where it went from not started to in progress when I click the first one, and then when I click the last one, it'll go from in progress to completed. And that is just, again, using display conditions in slightly different ways, which is for the top one, the display condition on in progress is basically I've interacted with it. So asset interacted, the image marker is selected there, and I've interacted with it is true. An interactive will be true whether you've started or finished interacting, which is why that doesn't go away. When I complete this, that says both in progress and completed. The display condition on completed is simply asset completed rather than interacted, so you do get both the options there, and I set this one to completed, image marker again, and that's true. So when I've clicked nothing, that's blank. I click the first one, it goes to in progress, and I click the last one, it goes to completed, still with in progress written there. This is written in a slightly different way where there are display conditions on here. So this will be displayed when it's neither completed nor interacted. So asset completed on the accordion is false. Asset interacted on the accordion is also false. And I've got the all set there, so both of those will be true. In progress is when completed is false, but interacted is true. So it's kind of that halfway stage. And completed is when they are both true. In actual fact, I could leave out the interacted there because the only time that completed is true is when it's already been interacted with. But it looked good that they all had two in there. So, and that's why they appear and then disappear, because you've got the true and the false in there. So when I've completed it, suddenly interacted and completed, that logic there doesn't make any sense. So that's a little bit about display conditions. I am just going to have a look at the question box and see if everyone's still with me. And again, this is kind of setting us up to kind of build on this. I just wanted to make sure everyone was happy with display conditions before we get to some of the more juicy stuff. So, any questions
Yeah,
about you?
yes, we do. We do. In fact, Chris, Richard has just asked about saying this is great, and does it work for videos as well as images in
Okay.
terms of
I will answer that with an example. So it's a
on
great
your
question,
first
Rich.
example? Richard is clarifying, saying on your
Yeah.
first
So
example.
is that this one here, where can I select between videos instead of images? Yeah, Richard's come back with yep. Yes, absolutely, you can. And I'm going to show that off actually. So I'm going to go into here. And this is some examples of real life how I've used display conditions. So a bit of the background to this little screen that you're looking at here is we wanted to brief people that work in our retail shops a little bit about expectations about how they look, so what they are wearing when they turn up to work. It's not a very strict thing, but we just wanted to make sure everyone was kind of within certain sensible guidelines. Now, I don't know if anyone had one of these books when they were younger, but you used to be able to get books where you flip the pages out and the pages are split into 3 or 4, so you can move someone's head and move their legs and have a different body, and that's what this is doing. So I can scroll through different heads, shoes, tops, legs, and I can get feedback based on what I've chosen. So if I put someone in a woolly hat with joggers and slippers, I would expect them not to be dressed for work. And actually, I've got some feedback here to say, don't really want you wearing a woolly hat at work. It should be a nice, comfortable temperature. You don't need a hat on. You look comfy, but it's not on brand, and we don't really want you in slippers. I can put some ripped, dirty jeans on. I can put some trainers on. I can give them some headphones, and this feedback over this side is changing as that happens. And this is all done with display conditions and hotspot images. So again, if I just go into the build of this, I come out of there, quickly just load this. And this is where it starts to get a little bit, it can be a little bit overwhelming when you see something like this that's been built in this way for the first time, because it's quite a long page. You've got to remember that you're never going to see all of this together. So what I've got here is all 4 heads, all 4 bodies, all 4 legs, and 4 pairs of shoes. And it's controlled with 4 variables. So the display condition on for example, this head with the purple hair is I've got a variable called people1 that equals 1. This head, variable people1, so I'm still using the same variable, but now this is displayed when that variable equals 2. This one will be 3, so same variable people1, but now the variable is 3, and that is people1 equals 4. So the same theory applies, that the variable people1 can't be equal to 1 and 3 at the same time, so you'll only ever see one head, and it goes down like that. So we've now got variable people2, and these 4 bodies will be equal to 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's how we're stopping multiple bodies, or a person with 3 sets of legs showing on the screen. And then you'll see these are hotspot images, and each one of these, so this, remember, is people1 equals 1. This hotspot image, the action, sets people1 to 2. The back arrow sets people1 to 4. So I'm looping around. It's a cycle. If I go forwards from 1, I go through 2, 3, 4, and if I go backwards from 1, I go through 4, 3, 2, and then back to 1 again. And by setting that for each of them, so this one is people2, if I set the hotspots, that will set it to 3, and this side hotspot will set it back to 1. So with just 4 variables, each set to 1 as their default value to start with, because you need a valid number in there to start with. What that means is when I click this button, it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So I'm just looping around each separate hotspot image. A key thing here is all the hotspot images have to be the same size. So use something like Photoshop, just make sure they're all, so each set of legs is the same size, each head is the same size. They can all obviously be different sizes individually. And then the way this feedback is generated is just with display conditions again. So each individual bit of feedback is listed, but the display conditions control when it shows up. So if I if I know that this picture here with the woolly hat on, that is people1 equals 3, then the display conditions for this will be when people1 equals 3, show them the message about you don't need to wear a woolly hat. And the same for, if they've got ripped jeans on, there'll be a message in here that appears when that's on the screen to say, we maybe don't want you wearing ripped jeans in the store. The final piece is that when there is an acceptable combination And there will be more than one combination that's acceptable. So here we are, we've got someone without headphones or a hat on. We've got a branded shirt, we've got black trousers, we've got black shoes. At that point, we can actually display this. So when there's the correct variable in each slot, correct value in each variable, we can display a success message. The only one I want to call out here is I've used equal for tops, trousers, and shoes. I haven't used equal for the heads because there's actually two that are acceptable, and I've just made sure that they are numbers 1 and 2, so I've been able to use less than 3. So if the head is number 1 or 2, it will say well done, and that's just really because we wanted to call out we haven't got any rules about hair color. We don't want you to wear headphones. We don't mind if you dye your hair blue. So that's the reason that's in there. So that's one example of how this comes together. Another example, this was just a quick, and I have anonymized this. This did contain some information about how shops work that I didn't really want recording, so I have made up a retailer for this. And this is just a really simple non-assessed quiz. So this is where I find I use a lot of these display conditions for is little mini knowledge checks. I don't want to assess someone. I don't want to collect a score. I don't want it to look like it's a test question. I'm just curious about whether someone's picked up the knowledge, and I want them to answer a question and be given a bit of feedback. So in this situation, the customer, I'm working in an electronics store, and the customers come in and they want to know how soon can we deliver a TV. The question I'm posing to the learner is, where would you go to find that out? And I might go, oh, it's on the internet. And you click that and it says, sorry, you didn't get that right. And actually the right answer on here is it's the warehouse stock checker. I might want to know where to find out how long a warranty is. That'll be on the manufacturer's website. Is this game compatible with my console? I check the box. And the customer wants to know about whether we can, whether we have a policy of price matching. And again, I could get that wrong, or I could try again. I could get that right. And the way that's built is very similar. It's just everything is on the screen all at once, and you're using display conditions to show whether you got that right or wrong. So again, I've got 4 variables, prod 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think they are on these. So if I click that, it says prod 1 to 1. This will be prod 1 to 2, and then that will be 3 and 4. Prod 2 set to 1, 2, 3, 4. Prod 3, prod 4. So I know what's been clicked, and then each of the either success or incorrect messages are display conditions. So if the learner clicks the second button down and set it to 2, show them the correct message. If they clicked any of the others, so if it, oh, wrong one. If it wasn't equal to 2, show them the incorrect message. And also, if it's not equal to 0, the reason that is because 0 is how everything starts on this page. All the variables have a default value of 0, and that's how I know that nothing's been changed. Hence, don't show either correct or incorrect. Okay, so that's more often than not how I find myself using display conditions, is just little knowledge checks, little check-ins, little kind of pauses in learning to find out how someone's getting on. You could, if you wanted to, take the result. You could check what that variable was later in the course and say well done, you got that right, and give them a score. But actually, it's more about just putting a pause on things, and is the information sinking in? And sometimes I find people react better to these than they do the formal, it looks like a quiz, you will get a score, you might fail type questions. And then Richard, to answer your question, I did get there in the end. It's been a long time coming, but I did get there. A video selector. So very similar to the same way that first example was. I've actually got, instead of buttons, I've got text links, but they work the same way. They set a variable, and I can play one of 3 videos. Nice relaxing videos, just to chill us out a little bit. and I finished with that one, and I can play a different video there. And that is working exactly the same way, which is I've got, in this case, their iframe link. So I've not got the videos in the course. I've got an iframe link just to keep the course nice and small. That has a display condition of, I've used score again just because it was a variable that was doing nothing in my course, but that has a variable that's set to 1 as a display condition. That is a variable that's set to 2 as a display condition, and that is a variable that's set to 3. And the exact opposite here, which is if I go into this, I don't know if you've all seen this, I sometimes use it as it's a Gomo action, so it works like a button, but it's a bit of text. So if you highlight a bit of text, you click Gomo action, and I'm setting that variable to 1, 2, or 3. And there's no practical limit how many videos you want on there. You know, if you want a dozen videos, you're just setting that to 11, 12, whatever you need to, as long as you have something else on that screen that has a display condition the same as what you've just set there, it will display when you press the button. And the others will be turned off, so it works the same way. You know, it's not adding the videos below. It's saying, well, that variable is no longer 2, it's 3, so I'm going to show this video. It's no longer 3, it's 1, so I'm going to turn video 3 off, turn video 1 on. Does that answer your question, Richard? I know that's I had you in mind because I know we for everyone else, me and Richard have spoken about this, and he asked how I would approach that. So I thought it's a very relevant example to use there. Okay. And then the last way I've used this, I built this actually when I was at Telefonica too. Not this exact one, it was one that worked in a very similar way. And it was a scenario builder. It was designed to help people think about the effect of what they say in a conversation. So here we've got a customer coming in wanting to buy something. They say, oh, you know, have you got that thing in stock? And one of the options that our sales colleague here could say is, I don't know, mate. And it almost immediately says like, oh yeah, that wasn't great. You know, do you want to have another go? So I can choose from one of these other ones. I can maybe think about offering it for delivery or collection. And the conversation goes on a little bit further if that happens. And I've cut this a little bit short, but if we get down to the bottom, you know, we get a little bit of feedback. So it's a very short conversational journey, but I could also get a little bit wrong. So, you know, I could be a little bit less enthusiastic about it. And I could ask the customer, instead of me calling them, I was like, oh, do you want to pop back in next week and see if we've got any? And it gives me different feedback if I do that. He says, oh, yeah, would you mind being a little bit more enthusiastic about it? And the way that's built is, again, just with display conditions. It is just keeping track of what's been said. So I've got variables called scenario 1, 2, and 3. And in here I set, you know, scenario 1 now equals 2 because I use the second option. This one will be scenario 1 equals 3. And as that goes down, different things will have different display conditions. And when we get all the way to the bottom, the display conditions down here are just keeping track of the answers I gave to each question to work out what level of feedback I'm giving. So every box has got every possibility in there of whether, you know, we didn't actually see both these at the same time because these also have display conditions based on what the answer in scenario 1 was, will tell you what the next reply potential is. So that's quite a nice little, you know, again, it's interactive. It gets people thinking. It's not just a list of do say this, don't say that. And it's what we always used to refer to as, you know, it's a bit of a safe space. You can try different things out and get you thinking about what the impact of that will be with this feedback at the bottom. Okay, so that was the first bit I wanted to cover just on display conditions. In my course, I'm just going to move on, and I'm going to build on that a little bit. So we're still going to use display conditions, but I'm I'm going to show how countdown timers will affect those. I'm going to start with a bit of a quiz. Now I know you can't interact with this because we've got you all muted, and I think the chat will be a little bit too slow for this. But I'll build a bit of a quiz just to show off countdown timers. So when I click start here, I'm just going to be shown logos, and I have about 5 seconds to say what the logo is, and I might get them right, I might get them wrong. It's keeping a score at the top. I should know this one because it's one of our brands, and that one is one of the Gomos. So I got 4 out of 5 there. And this is just a bit of a fun way of introducing countdown timers, which I think are a really, really underused element in Gomo. So I've written a bit of an introduction. Essentially, a countdown timer, it fires an action when the time gets to 0. So you give it a time, say 10 seconds, 5 seconds, counts down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When it gets to 0, something happens. And we can see those in that quiz in the authoring view, which is just a bar with 3 seconds on it, and it has an action, and the action here is actually go to the next screen. Okay, so that's what happens when it gets to 0. It just really rudely just moves me onto the next screen, which is why it went through quite quickly. So this countdown timer counts down for 5 seconds, and when it gets to 0, it changes a string to say timer finished. But like with the buttons and the display conditions, we don't need to use a variable. So this box at the bottom actually doesn't use a variable at all. That box at the bottom, if I show you again in the authoring view, is triggered by, so display condition here, asset completed, countdown timer is true. So just like when we pressed a button and we had something appear when that asset was complete, i.e. I'd press the button, we can have something appear when the countdown timer asset completes. And that starts to, again, it's just saves you having a long list of variables when things are happening. If you just want something to appear after a certain number of seconds, don't worry about putting a variable in for it. Just say, make this box appear, or make this image appear, or make this video appear when this countdown timer reaches 0 by using the asset completed condition. And there's a whole bunch of different types of countdown timers. So we've got the bar, we've got the circle, we've got the pie chart, we've got text one, and these are just text boxes that are set to appear with a little emoji of a tick box in when they reach 0, in exactly the same way as on the other page. Interestingly, we've also got a hidden one, and that's mostly what I'm going to focus on, is this hidden one. The one I'm swirling my mouse around, but by very definition, you can't see because it's hidden. We'll cover I'll go into a little bit more detail about why they're so interesting, the hidden countdown timers in a second. But it's also worth noting that a countdown timer, as well as firing an action off when it completes, you can also give it a display condition. So the countdown timer on this page won't appear till I've clicked this button, and then it appears. So that's the display condition that makes it appear, and the action makes that appear. So like a lot of other assets in Gomo, like that, they will have a display condition that says, don't appear till these things happened, and that's when we start to get a bit more of the power out of them. So the most powerful part of a countdown timer is the 0-second hidden timer. What I did allude to is you can put a time in there. So this one is set for 5 seconds. That was the very first one we saw. You may think that the lowest number you can put in there is 1 second. It's not. It's 0. You can have a countdown timer that fires immediately that it becomes available. So whether that's when the page loads, or whether a display condition makes it appear, which is in brackets for a hidden one, right? When it appears on the page. Okay, so I'm going to quite quickly go into why this is useful. So one of the reasons I found a hidden countdown timer useful, and I'll explain what's happening afterwards, is this idea of logic. So you've all seen logic. You've all seen where the AND logic means I have something that appears when I've done all four things. Okay, so in this view, I have a box here, and the display condition is when I've interacted with those four buttons. True, 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 true. And I've got all, or and at the top. This one is or. I just need to press one of them. Doesn't matter which one. I can press one of the buttons. Oh, in fact, it doesn't reset, does it? So it doesn't matter if I press more than one. I just got to press one or more. And the logic there is exactly the same, but this is set to any. I just need to press one of the buttons. But I can go a little bit further, and here what it's asking me to do is press buttons 1 and 2 and 3 or 4. So I can press 1 and 2. I'm going to skip over 3. I'm going to press 4. And as soon as I've done that, it will... my logic is true. And this works in a slightly different way because I've got one of these hidden countdown timers. So what's happening here is the display condition on this box is when I've pressed button 1, so button 1, I've pressed button 2, and my countdown timer is triggered. And the countdown timer is triggered when I've pressed either button 3 or 4. So if you like, this countdown timer is telling me that I've pressed one of those buttons. The reason it's a 0-second hidden one is because I want it to happen straight away, and I don't want to see it happening. Now, easier than talk about it is seeing it. So on this screen, I've actually slowed it down, and I'll do a 1-second visible timer. So I click button 1, I click button 2, and when I click button 3, the countdown timer pops up, and when it completes, it knows that I've completed what I'm being asked to do, which is 1 and 2 and one of these 3 or 4. So that's where countdown timers start to be a bit more useful. A good way of thinking about it is you can have something happen when another combination of things have happened, and they all trigger that countdown timer together. And then the last one, so if anyone is kind of more sort of mathsy, programmery, this is what we call an exclusive or. So as well as pressing 1 and 2, I want to press one of 3 and 4 again, but I don't want to press both of them. And the way this works is if I, well, let's go in a different order. So I press 1, 3, then 2, so that's true. So exactly the same as last time, that is true. But then if I press 4, it goes off again. Because that's not what I was asked to do. I was asked to press 1 and 2, and then 3 or 4, but not both of them. And in the same way, I can show that by making them visible. So this countdown timer appeared when I clicked both these two. This one appeared when I clicked one of these two. And the logic is when I've pressed button 1 and button 2, and the countdown time that says I've pressed one of the button, the third or the fourth, but the countdown time that says when I've pressed both of the last two buttons is false. And I've had to use 2 countdown timers here. So this is the one that says you press both of the buttons, that's bad. And this is one that says you pressed one of the buttons, so it's got an any, that's good. So then the logic behind this statement here is button 1 and button 2 and this countdown timer is true, but not this countdown timer, because this is the one that means I've pressed both of those buttons. And it's a bit of a leap of logic, but what we're looking at here is if there is a learning situation where someone might have to choose a combination of goods or options on a product. If you're stood in a car dealership and you're speccing up a new car, and you can have the nice wheels and you can have the metallic paint, but you can't have both leather trim and fabric trim because that makes no sense. It's about educating people what is a valid combination of options. So in this case, button 3 might be my leather seats and button 4 might be my fabric seats, and something here is saying no, you can't have both. Please choose a valid combination to proceed. Okay, and then just in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over. In fact, no, I think we can cover this quite quick. The last way I'm going to use countdown timers is just to know when you've been to a page. So I'd like you all to remember the word banana and notice what I'm doing. So I'm just going forward to the next page. The next page says, I just want you to go back. So I'm not doing anything special. I'm not clicking any buttons apart from I'm going to go back. And now this page has changed. And the reason this page has changed is because there is a countdown timer on the next page. And when that 0-second countdown timer triggered, as soon as the page loaded, it then set. In fact, it didn't even set a variable. It just made this page change. So in the authoring view, what that looks like is if I go to the first page, it has both banana and orange on there. So it's got both those messages. And on this page, when you click back, this countdown timer triggered to say, oh, you've been here before. And then when I go forwards, the same thing happens again. Okay, so you can do it in two ways. You can either have a countdown timer on a page where as soon as the page loads, it sets a variable, or it fires to say, this event has now happened, do something different. Or there is actually a built-in there's a built-in display condition for whether you visited a page. So how that first one was working is display condition here is, have you visited page 2? Yes. And have you visited page 2? You've not interacted with it. So there's two ways of doing it. One involves the countdown timers, one involves just a standard display condition. And the other thing that they are useful for is if you have an interaction and you want to reset it, then they are really useful for doing that. So as standard, if I ask a learner to choose something on a page, if I go, okay, pick the right answer here, and they pick 2, and actually they want to have another go at it, then it already says 2. It will already show whatever the result is, and it's not a great experience. But using a countdown timer, so if I have another go at that, if I go 1 there, go forward, go back, nothing. Click 4, go forward, go back, nothing. And the reason that one works is, again, countdown timers, that every time this page is visited, this countdown timer, this hidden 0-second countdown timer, has an action that sets a variable to nothing. So this is setting number 2 to 1, this is setting number 2 to 2, this is setting number 2 to 3, etc. And it doesn't, I can click those, and I can click those as much as I want, and it works exactly like you'd expect. But every time I visit this page after moving off it, this countdown timer fires and goes, right, ignore what it was before, you're now set to nothing. So it's a really nice way to reset an interaction that you want to have a fresh start at. And then the finale, the kind of thing that where this all comes together is using display conditions and countdown timers to do something quite interesting. So Hugh, I hope you're ready for this. I'm going to click the button. It's going to just say the name of a piece of fruit. Okay, so it's an orange. If I click reset, the word orange disappears. If I click the button again, it's now apple. Click reset, click it again, banana. banana, banana, orange, orange, orange. So it's actually mostly random. It's not giving me an apple in a while, which tells me it probably is quite random. And the challenge I set myself was, is it possible to do random things in Gomo? And the answer normally is no. There is no random number generator. There's no way of coming up with something random when you click a button. You click a button, there is an action assigned to that button, and it will always do that same action. But every time I click this button, it's picking a random fruit. And the way this is working is with, you'll be shocked to hear, it's with countdown timers and display conditions. So here's a visible representation of it. So what I've done is I've made the countdown timers visible, and I've set them to 1 second instead of 0 seconds. Remember that a 0 second countdown timer just says, as soon as it appears on the page, do that thing. Here, the 1 second means just wait a second before you do that thing. And what's happening is there are actually 3 countdown timers. So if we load it here, there are 3 countdown timers here. One of them is visible when string 2 equals apple, and the action on that sets it to say banana. String 2 equals, set string 2 to banana. One of them is visible, one of them is visible when string 2 equals banana, and the action is to set it to say orange. And one of them, you may be 1 step ahead of me, is visible when string 2 equals orange, and it sets it to say apple. At which point, once it says apple, this one becomes visible because that's the display condition, and it sets it to say banana. And then this one becomes visible because the display condition here is banana, and it sets it to say orange. So it just goes around in a circle. It just goes around those 3 fruits. And what's happening is it's doing it so quickly. So this again is slowed down. So you can see it going apple, banana, orange, apple, banana, orange. I hit stop. And the other display condition here is there's a thing called running. When it's equal to 1, just keep going. The stop button sets it to 0, so it stops on the last fruit it was set to. Hit go again, set running to 1, and it just carries on from where it was. Which is okay, but if it's only doing it once per second, if I click through at a regular rate, I'm probably always going to see the same fruit. So actually what's happening here is it's invisible until I hit the button, but it's running through as fast as it possibly can. It's going at 0 seconds, which means as soon as the web page loads that variable, change it to the next one, change it to the next one, change it to the next one. So I'd never know what's going to happen when I press the button fruit because it's changing maybe 100 times a second, and I'm not that accurate with my finger to always time it the same. So the only difference with this one is when it's running, I make that text box invisible. I hide it with a display condition. So that kind of answers my question of, can I make something random in Gomo? And the answer turned out to be yes. And then I thought, can I make it even better? And I work for an online gaming company, so I thought, why don't we all try and pick a card? So Hugh, I don't know if you want to come off mute and just give me a random card, any card. Just tell me
Oh,
what it is.
right. Any card.
Pick
And you
any
want me
card.
to tell you? Any
Yes, I
card.
would like you to tell me.
Ace of Hearts.
The Ace of Hearts. Oh, it's the Jack of. You were close. It's the Jack of Hearts. But I can reset it, and I can click it again. It's the Five of Diamonds. And I can reset it, and I can click it again. It's the Jack of Diamonds, or the Four of Hearts. And this is working
That's
exactly the same
astonishing.
way, which is, again, I've slowed them down, but this this countdown timer is cycling through all 4 suits, and this one is cycling through all 13. Now, cards are quite nice because you've got 4 suits, you've got 13 cards, so it quite quickly loses any sort of relationship because one thing's going through 4 and one thing's going through 13, so it takes 52 cycles for them to line up again. But again, imagine this running really fast, 100 times a second, and you press a button and stop it dead in its tracks, and it just shows you the last one. In fact, so that's it here. If I take the display condition off there, and all that's done is meant that this text box is always going to be visible. We'll see how fast that previews. But essentially, what you will see is that text box running as fast as it possibly can. Just oh no, it has. I was going to say just while that previews, because I'm used to it taking a little bit longer than that. I was going to show you something else. So, what have I done? Oh no, it's on the next one, isn't it? No. Here, what have I done? Right. For some reason, I didn't remove that properly. So I'm going to preview that again. I will just move on to the last bit while that previews, which is how are you going to put this into a practical use? Because we don't all work for online gaming companies, so we don't need to pick a random card. And the answer to that is I find it quite nice to be able to offer randomized content. So if I click next on here, I'm going to see a picture that we're probably all familiar with by now. But if I click back and then forwards, I've only got 3 pictures, so come on, don't do this to me. There we go. So it's finally a different one. So it's picking one of those 3, and this page could be anything. You know, this page could have text on it, could have videos, it could be an entirely whole different page based on you can put display conditions on a page, not just the elements on a page. And that's working in the same way that there is a timer running on this page, which is constantly running round 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and when I click next, because the timer then gets thrown away, it fixes on a number, and that's what's driving what appears on this page. Just to go back to the cards, by the way, so this is what was happening in the background, and when I press the button, it just stops it. And when I press the button again, it stops. So it's just, you can see how fast that's going. In fact, actually, I'm looking at the preview of the screen share. You can't see how fast that's going. That looks like it's going about sort of 5 per second. On my screen, it's going 20 times faster than that. It's insane. And then yeah, that last one is just 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 out of these countdown times in the same way, and then all 3 pictures on this page driven by what that variable ended up being. And that, in a slightly chaotic way, was about that. So we made it to the end of my thrown together course. I don't know if there's a lack of questions because I've completely lost everyone or what. But hopefully the recording will be useful for people working out what I did.
Chris, that's really astonishing, particularly those techniques like randomization like that. It's just
Yeah,
wow,
I think what I've
quite
just done is maybe
astonishing.
a 5-minute webinar on randomization with a lot of build up of how I got there. But hopefully people will find the use of the timers for resetting something that you've already visited. I use that a surprising amount, and display conditions I can't live without either. So yeah,
And I
these are
think
all things that I genuinely use a lot of.
I think one of the one of the important things as well is that we've been looking at this in the weekly webinars where we've been having an initial look at display conditions and variables is the recommendation to exactly what you must have done there, Chris, is just think through the logic and build it up step by step until you're doing something amazing like Chris has been showing here. Because quite often people say to us, "Oh well, we can see that Gomo you can do some really simple stuff. It's just drag and drop. You can't do serious stuff that you can do in other tools." And when we see what Chris does here, it's like, "Oh wow, that's yeah, you really can." There's usually a way to do it. In this case, with variables, display conditions, countdown timers, and yeah,
And
astonishing, Chris.
sometimes it's about having very similar images with display conditions where you do something and the image swaps, and it looks like something's happening to the image. Actually, it's just swapping a whole new image on top, right? But you made them in a way that it's quite seamless. And one top tip, if you are getting involved in a lot of these sort of display conditions and real complex logic, is actually what I did when I wrote this to start with. I didn't have the statements in. They actually sort of said, scenario 1-2, which meant that I want this to appear when the answer to scenario 2 was the first answer. And you can then, when you click the buttons and you see that on the screen, you go, okay, yeah, I know that appeared because of that rule. So you actually just, don't be scared about writing the logic on the screen instead of what you want to appear to the end user, because you can change all that later. It will help you debug it. Or have a box with every single variable you're using. So, I might drop in down here a text box, and I've just put scenario 1 in there, and it'll tell me what that's set to when it starts running, obviously. And then as you click the buttons, you can see how it's changing, and that'll also help you troubleshoot. So just put every single variable in a text box on the screen, and that will save you hours of doing this sort of thing.
Well, Chris, we're at the top of the hour now,
We
and
are.
we have had some questions about whether this is being recorded. It is, because I'm sure that we're all going to want to take some time to review all that you've shown us today. It's been absolutely fascinating. In fact, you're right, Chris. I've learned so much. There are things that I didn't realize we could
Well,
do
thank
in
you.
Gomo. So,
And I did
uh,
see a question there about, when I've got to grips with the basics, I hope to watch the video. Yeah, don't. If anyone is just getting to grips with Gomo and just starting on that journey, please don't think you have to do all this. It's only because I've been using it for what, 5 years now, maybe. And I'm just seeing what can be done. So if you're looking terrified right now because you think you have to be using variables all the time, you absolutely do not. Please don't be scared.
and I think the important thing is for us all just to be inspired that we can see that these things are possible. So as and when we need to use them, we can think, oh, okay. So let me remind myself how Chris managed to do that, which I think is the important thing, particularly if you have people giving you design briefs and saying, we really want it to work like this and so forth. To think, oh yeah, there is a way to do that. But I can't see any other questions coming in there. Just a reminder that if you are completely new to Gomo, you can actually sign up for a 21-day trial, which is all the features, so you can try all of the things Chris has been showing today. Just go to our website, gomolearning.com, and you'll see the trial button there. We can get you set up. And do look out for future webinars as well. You'll find that in the events section in Gomo Learning. And I think maybe we need to do one on countdown timers as well, having learned so much today. But otherwise, I'd just say to Chris, a huge virtual round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with you. That's
You are
been incredibly
absolutely
valuable.
welcome.
And I'd also just say to our visitors to the webinar from the US, hope that your 4th of July is great for you. And we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. So again, thank you, Chris, and look forward to seeing everyone again soon.
No problem. Thank you, everyone.